All right. It's time to talk about the kind of things that have been happening in AI this week that caught my attention. It's really fascinating the things that you see in the headlines. It's also funny the things that get the most attention, and it's not always the story that you think might be really valuable for people to understand going forward. And so we're going to talk about a few really interesting stories today. One in particular is really not something that's heavily covered, but I thought was really important for this audience to see. And you're getting a slice of it already in the headlines below. What is the open source of OpenAI? We're going to talk about that and several other insightful tidbits from Sam Altman's visit to Washington, D.C. It's kind of funny. The things that we talk about in AI on a daily basis, especially for me, because of the amount of time that I spend in front of leaders making key decisions on artificial intelligence programs, delivering capability to their organization at large. It is really fascinating to see these conversations with folks like Sam Altman, who is a CEO and is helping to drive the future of AI. And he had some really interesting tidbits to share with us as he went to Washington this week. But it wasn't just Sam. Now, I'm going to cover the comments that Sam made, but I just want to be clear. This conversation was more than just Sam Altman. There were a few other key chief executives and even a president of Microsoft that were present in the meeting, and they had some really interesting and I think valuable insights to share in a congressional hearing regarding the state of affairs. And I really think that this description is appropriate. The topic of the conversation was winning the AI race. And I would equate this in many ways to the space race. We were in a locked continuous competition with Russia to be the first nation to reach the moon and plant the flag. And we were successful at that. We've tasted success as the United States of America. But there is an increasing dialogue in this country that China is not too far behind. Now, whether or not you are a fan of geopolitics, or perhaps you're cheering on the United States of America to win the AI race, or perhaps you'd like to see someone else lead, I do think that the conversation is very interesting. And I think it's really pretty amazing that these kinds of conversations are available for you and I to watch at our leisure on the public internet. These are not closed door proceedings, they are open conversations. And so we're going to take advantage of exactly that situation today and talk a little bit about the conversation that these folks had. Now, I want to be clear, this conversation was driven by folks in our Congress. They, just like any other organization, have an agenda that they want to seek out a certain kind of information. Perhaps they want to support the approach that they're taking on various legislation that they may or may not be proposing. But I think the goal is very clearly stated up front for this conversation: winning the AI race. But the kinds of things that they talked about in the conversation, and I'll be upfront, I did not watch the entire 3 hours, but I did quite a bit of research on the meeting, and I watched nearly the whole thing on my return flight from Las Vegas. I spent all week at a major convention talking about, what you guessed it, AI. And I brought back some interesting insights that I might share throughout our journey tonight. But I really want to focus on some of these key insights that were revealed and really give you the impression that these leaders have around the world in terms of how they see things, how they understand the way that the regulation is affecting us, the way that it impacts what we're able to do, and whether or not we can win the AI race. So, without further ado, let's dive into some of these items, specifically with Sam Altman's comments. And, it's kind of funny, as the conversation got started, Sam really shared some thoughts about where we are as a country. So I'm going to play through several of these clips. We'll let a few minutes of the conversation play. And I think that, breaking this down and letting you see the key moments is really a quick way to do this. I don't want this to substitute for watching the publicly available video, so I will be putting that in the comments below for you to go and watch separately. And I'm also putting on screen the links directly to the timestamp in the video so you can review this at your leisure as well. But we'll just step through it and I'll watch it with you and we'll have some commentary on exactly what Sam is sharing with us. Boy, do I ever agree with these comments and this sentiment. And in fact, I'll be honest with you, the reason for starting this channel is really about that concept of tinkering, the idea that you can do anything, you can try anything, and you can build the future in doing it. And Sam has been thinking about this for a long time. Look, he gets a lot of publicity for being the leader at OpenAI, and he's also not been shy about sharing his feelings. And I think that it's important for us to recognize that really the sentiment that he is sharing here, I think is very genuine. uh, I I don't sense or detect anything about his comments here that would indicate he's being dishonest or not fully truthful. And I think that that is a really fantastic way to start the conversation. My policy is to be as straightforward with you as we are having these conversations as I possibly can. And my reaction to Sam's comments there are 100% aligned with the way that I see the world. There's three things that I want to share with you in the comment that he just gave us. Number one, he set the stage and gave us a part of his own personal story in what he presented there. And I think that's really valuable, right? What are the things that you thought about as a kid? We all had hopes and dreams, and many of those things have been changed over time. Perhaps because we try to live in a more realistic world. Perhaps we've had some of that inspiration beaten out of us from all of the work, the challenge, the difficulty, perhaps even the mistakes that we've made throughout our lifetime. But what I love about what he presented there was it's going to continue. We're going to do this. I'm chasing it. I'm not giving it up. So let's go and let's do this. The AI revolution is still upon us. And whether or not you feel like him calling himself a parent of the AI revolution is perhaps a bit egotistical, I don't think that OpenAI's contribution to the progress that we've made as a nation and as a global world is to be understated. We are so much building on the things that came before us that it's very difficult to determine where one innovation ends and another begins. I was contemplating this on my return trip from the AI conference this week in Las Vegas. And the reality of where we are today is that without the cloud computing capabilities, without the DevOps, without the IT information library to help us figure out how to do all of this stuff with technology, we wouldn't be having this conversation. There is so much complexity in our world today. We pull out the phone and we watch video clips of people on the internet, and it's wholly underappreciated what it is and what it takes for that technology to be in the palm of your hand. And it's people like Sam that are helping to make it come true. So I think that's a really wonderful introduction for him to have made to get us into some of the thoughts and ideas that are going to be presented. Now, to be clear, I think like any good leader, Sam takes the opportunity to promote the things that he's been working on, and Project Stargate is no exception. But let's hear what Sam had to say about telling us a little bit about it. Yeah, again, totally agree. And I think harkening back to where we've already been in terms of the evolution of the internet and the things that we did as a country and as a society to bring that technology to life have been incredibly valuable to the world at large. In fact, one of the interesting reflections that I had in thinking deeply about where we've been on this technology journey, looking back across my lifetime, what I grew up with as a kid, that was really essential to my experience in deciding to take up technology, having this technology at my disposal and finding that I was very effective and good at helping others to take advantage and benefit from the use of technology. I think we have a lot of opportunity ahead with AI. And I've said it before, and I think Sam is very much echoing the same idea. In fact, I'm hearing this repeated from various different people. But I think the more you get into the value opportunity we have with AI, there is absolutely something in common with the mobile technology revolution, with the internet revolution, with the evolution of capabilities that are foundationally built on this concept of a network and connecting with each other. So, the next part of the conversation, I think, is really what inspired me to share with you the commentary that was provided by Sam, connecting with the mistakes and really going and doing things. And we'll come back to this again, but I'm going to play the clip for you now so we can kind of get into, what is the thinking about where we are headed in terms of this concept of freedom versus guardrails versus, how do we protect people the right way, use the technology in the way that makes the most sense. And his quote, I think, is going to carry forward for me in many different ways. Boy, there's so much in that conversation there that we need to dive into. And I think this bears revisiting, but there were kind of three things that came out there, right? One, not all users are the same in terms of how we are treating and interacting with technology at large. Another great example is that we don't really fully understand how the nascent technology affects a child's mind versus that of an adult. And I think that Sam is right to push the differentiation between them. But I think it is a tightrope to walk because, his commentary around, if we could tell this was a kid with certainty, we'd do something different. But we really do have some things that are already in place that allow us to put a framework around that. And largely, I don't see that we're doing that. So there is a little bit of a credibility gap there from my perspective. I appreciate Sam's honesty in saying that he does want to treat a user that is a child a bit differently than a user that is an adult. But I think we really do have a lot of work to do here. And the congressperson's comments around we don't want to repeat the mistakes of what happened with the internet. I think that is a valuable assessment to make. And in fact, that is something that I want to emphasize on the channel. When we talk about making mistakes with AI, that is about pushing the limits, testing things out, figuring out and learning for yourself through experimentation exactly what the limitations of the technology are. But it doesn't mean that we ignore consequences. It doesn't mean that we don't look for opportunities to learn from the mistakes that are happening by others in different times. Often there are many lessons regarding AI that we can look in history and understand. And it seems like we are repeating some of the same discussions that we had in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, and the 80s. The conversation continues to repeat. And I want us to continue this conversation around how we can learn from those things. But we ought not let those lessons keep us from doing experimentation in valuable way. There is absolutely a possibility that we can set up ways to learn and experiment without running afoul of repeating the mistakes from the past. And I do like the philosophy presented as we go through these last couple of bits of video. I think we're really dancing around some key things that we need to deal with. And this idea of responsibility versus accountability versus, where does it fit in the spectrum? Where does it make sense for us to align ourselves in terms of what is permissible, what is allowable, and what is appropriate? I wanted you to see the entire clip there for a couple of different reasons. The reality is that technology is neither good nor bad. It is how we use it that matters. And the affairs of government and policy is to establish what we find to be a permissible use of a technology and what we find to be a non permissible use of a technology. It goes across many different lines, and I think that the point to take away there is that it is possible for this fantastic technology to do harm and to be wielded in a way that creates harm. And I would say that it is a responsibility of all of us to understand what those uses are, and by our using the technology the right way, push out that bad use of the technology, to educate others and to share what we learn so that we can make it a force for good rather than a force for evil. And when I say evil, I do mean that. It is absolutely horrendous that people are finding themselves in a situation where AI is used in a malicious way to do real harm, and the people that are taking these actions know exactly what they're doing. And we should do everything we can to prevent exactly that from happening. But going back to the beginning of the quote, users are smart. People understand, what these systems are good at, when to use them and when not. I don't know. This is one of those for me where I really feel like Sam is surrounded by the highest of the high, the greatest experts in the field. Yeah, I mean, if you're spending your entire day with PhDs and people that are building these AI systems, maybe you do feel like users are smart. But Mr. Altman, I got to tell you, man, not every user of every system is smart. And if there is one thing I have learned from literal decades in information technology, is that we put the technology in the hands of people that sometimes don't understand the technology. And there is real risk involved. Now, Sam was specifically speaking to the question around hallucinations. And are we doing enough with the technology to prevent those kinds of errors, to prevent the kind of harm that's possible when people misunderstand statements that are made? And I think that I was actually pretty disappointed by Sam's response here, because if you look at the latest models, and I think OpenAI should be very proud of the evolution that they are taking with the models. The models are dramatically improving in some ways. I'm still not in the camp that says, AGI is going to happen tomorrow, but definitely there are places where the frontier is advancing, but there are still places where the frontier has a lot of work to do. And unfortunately, with the most recent iteration, the hallucinations have gotten to be more frequent. We actually sort of fell back down a little bit. Now, the good thing is that OpenAI is admitting this. They're being upfront about it. They're sharing the details and the benchmarks that they are discovering about the models. I think that's a very healthy thing to do. But I also think that Sam should be admitting, look, the hallucination bar is going to move. We know that we're able to advance the models, but sometimes that means the hallucinations are reoccurrent or perhaps happen more frequently based upon the input that it's given. I do think the technology is very valuable, despite the fact that there are still hallucinations. And, companies like the one that I work for in my day-to-day job are advancing the research and improving on how we can solve that situation and significantly reduce the hallucinations. But, I go back to some of the conversation that was had on social media last year, and we talked about this idea. I think it was Ilya, who was a part of the OpenAI team at one point, and now has started his own AI company. Basically said that, hey, look, hallucinations are a feature, not a bug. And in fact, being able to create wild new scenarios with the information that is stored in these large language models does have some value. And there are very specific use cases where you really could get some excellent feedback, ideation opportunities by just saying, come up with something wild and let's bounce it around a little bit. But there are use cases and times when those hallucinations can do real harm. And we have to continue to build systems that will be more accountable. And I think that, the likes of Google are doing real progress against those kinds of capabilities. I've been very impressed with the verification capabilities that they are building. But I think as a technology space, we have a lot of opportunity to improve sort of our self-checking, our fact-checking mechanisms in the platform to say, okay, here's where this source came from. We validated the source and even went and cross-checked that the source had the information that was cited in the model. I think we could really do a lot better there. So that's one of those areas where perhaps he was answering more on the cuff and wasn't so careful about citing those resources, but we do still have a lot of work to do. Yes, there are smart users, but that's not the whole story. Now, as we are focusing on the policy elements from here and out, I just want to point out that a large part of this conversation was really around how do we win the AI war? And what does that mean from a policy perspective? I think this is an intelligent question for our lawmakers to be asking, right? Where does the policy, where does the governance, where does the law come into play as it pertains to the development of this technology? At no time in history have we had such stringent advance of regulation in multiple different ways, and different elements of our government are pushing on what it is that is the right answer. and you have state governments, you have local governments, you have the federal government, and you have positions that they have all taken. And this is a very important question. I'm going to spend a few more minutes on this section of the video because I think it is salient. We have to continue this dialogue because ultimately, especially for the conversations I have every day for my day job, the minute a leader says, yes, we want to do AI in our organization, we want to make things better, solve more problems, and move fast, the very next question they ask is, how are we going to make sure this is done the right way? That is 100% the right question to be asking. And this conversation is very important and it's not going away anytime soon. Before he goes on, and we'll pull in some of the other details here, but it's really great for me as a citizen of the United States to hear one of our congressmen say the things that I 100% agree with. And I'll just be honest with you. I don't have any idea what political affiliation Mr. Schatz here has. And honestly, I don't care because what he said, I completely agree with. We want to export our values because if you go back to the very first clip with Sam talking about growing up as a kid and how important the innovation opportunities have been inside of the United States and the advancements that have been made, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of people having the opportunity to do things that they did not have in wherever it is that they came from. And we talk about immigration in the country, so much of that is politically charged today. But I am 100% a fan of let us give people an opportunity to take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of them and make great things happen. And that is the takeaway. We want to do that not just here in the US, we want to make that possible everywhere around the world. And I don't think we talk about that enough these days. We ought not let that lesson slip by. And I would applaud this congressman for taking that position and saying that. But I want to continue the video a little bit further, even though it's not Sam, because I want you to hear this next part. Boy, again, I haven't covered this topic specifically on the channel to date, but there is real work being done to try to solve some of that problem. I do think it is valuable for us to have a good understanding of when something is AI generated and when it is real. I have on occasion on the channel used AI generated things it's not uncommon for me to leverage AI in creating thumbnails. You're going to continue to see that because I want you to click on my videos. I want you to see it. And generating things with AI provides that extra push of, what's going on there? I need to find out what's behind that thumbnail. But I also think it's very important that we're honest and straightforward because I have seen for myself the increasing conversation of, "What is that real?" And there are a lot of creators and innovators in the space that are constantly pushing the envelope of what is possible. But it's very clear to me that we are headed for a world where it is increasingly difficult to discern reality from artificial creation. And when I sit in front of the camera and I have this conversation, it is genuinely me because I feel like that is absolutely essential. There's 1,000 different ways that I could run the narrative, have an avatar that speaks to you, but I just don't feel like that is the right thing to do. And this is one of those things where I'd actually kind of like to hear what your thoughts are. If you have some thoughts about, the use of AI on the channel, what do you think the right thing to do there is? I mean, I could grow the channel by using an avatar to talk about ideas and things that I support, or perhaps have even put together with the use of AI, but I just don't feel like that is the genuine connection that I actually want to create with the content on the channel. So thus far, I have not used that except to show you the technology to demonstrate what is possible. And I really like this idea of some sort of a cue around the content to let you know how it has been generated. I'm not sure that the what the Microsoft president was putting forward there is the answer, but what I do like is that they are taking action. They're trying to sort through, how can we do this? How can we flag what is generated and push us in the right direction? And I'll leave you with this before I go on to the last point. I do believe that we absolutely need an authentication mechanism that enables us to determine with absolute certainty that we are connecting directly with another human being. We are quickly coming upon a time when that will be a necessity in ways that we did not anticipate. There is a lot of fiction out there, but as the quality of the ability to create artificial environments and things continues to improve, this is only going to be more important in our increasingly digital world. And there's some other stories, perhaps we'll cover that in another video. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in terms of that artificial creation, and we could have a great conversation about that. All right, moving on to the last piece. And this was really what was behind the banner I had at the beginning of the video. This is Sam talking about what's going to happen next at OpenAI. Wow. And it is this point that I want to hammer home. I've been saying it now for the last year and a half, pretty adamantly. I have technology in my home that leverages power in multiple different ways. Having some solar panels, having the Tesla Powerwall for battery backup and for energy storage, having the grid tie. All of these things enable my lifestyle. I can't do all of the things with the computers and the AI models and the technology without having power to my home. And the truth is, as much as I love the solar panels, it is just not enough. The sun only shines for a few hours a day, and my roof can only accommodate so many cells. I don't have any space where I live to put panels on the ground and have them capture additional energy. And today there's a lot of work being done in wind, but it's just not at a point where I could put wind generation facilities on my home and not have it look terrible and have my neighbors get mad at me about it. So I have to have power from other means. And where I am here in Texas, that means the majority of our power grid is powered by natural gas. In some cases, there's a lot of petrochemical work that is generating my lifestyle. That is the creation of energy. And of course, there are multiple different sources, including hydroelectric here in Texas. Texas has one of the most diverse grid environments of anywhere around the world. And there are challenges that come with that diversification of energy sources. And actually, not that long ago, there was a pretty significant situation in Spain where they had a total grid failure as a direct result of the adoption of solar energy, because it is a challenging deal to deal with. Look, we all of this is a great big experiment when you start to change the fuel sources that are on the grid. We've gone through decades of we've had energy sources from the atom, and we've decided that that was a bad thing because we had some mistakes that were made in the management of those resources. But I don't think that the difficulty that we've had with, for example, nuclear power is any reason to further discourage the investigation and deployment of those capabilities. As far as I can see it, I'm 100% in agreement with Sam here. And the way that I would say it is we need every kind of power that we can possibly get our hands on as quickly as we can, because we are increasingly finding things to do with the power as it is created. Now, you could have a discussion about, are we doing the right things to mitigate the way that we are wasting the usage of that power? Well, sure. But also, unfortunately, the reality of our world is we have enough food to feed the world's population, and yet we still have people that are starving. It is a distribution problem as much as it is a generation problem. If you can't grow the food in the places around the world that need it the most, that's a problem. And there are geopolitical circumstances that prevent us from feeding some of the folks that are hungry, that need the food. It is not simply a matter of, do we have it? It is, do we have it and can we get it to them, and can they actually be allowed to consume it in a meaningful way? These are all challenges that we have on a micro and a macro scale for the building out of our capabilities. There's quite a bit of data center discussion during this congressional hearing, and I'm not going to cover that. But suffice it to say this, there is a lot of work to be done, and regulation absolutely plays a role in that. I love that Sam is sharing the go forward and saying, look, we are going to open source a model. I think that's going to be an interesting thing that we'll talk about. And I really can't wait to get my hands on whatever it is that they're going to release. And honestly, I hope I'm not disappointed. But, speaking of what OpenAI is releasing, now I want to transition into the last part of the discussion that we need to have, because there's something else that happened this week beyond this commentary, this quote that Sam says, people make mistakes and learn to do better the next time. Well, it even came up during the hearing, because what happened this week? Well, they finally admitted it. They finally gave up the for-profit conversion. I'm actually really glad to see this happen, because there are multiple reasons that it's just not necessary. And I think it was a distraction to their core mission. And I'm so glad to hear that they're going to release a public model, uh, and that they're going to open source it, because I really do believe that OpenAI is doing things that no one else is doing. And while others are discovering it, we could do so much more. And I also believe that we need to temper our closed and open approaches to maximize the benefit to the world at large. And I'm excited that we can turn the page on the mistake, and I'm going to call it that, of trying to convert OpenAI to a for-profit organization. I can totally understand where the motivation and the priorities might come from this. And the truth is that all of this really came out of the conversation when Sam was really fighting for his position inside of OpenAI. It wasn't that long ago that there was a straight up battle for who is going to be in charge of OpenAI and what is that going to look like. And both Sam Altman and Elon Musk have been very public in their comments about OpenAI and what they feel is appropriate and necessary. And the kind of guy that Elon is, he said, we don't agree. And I'm just going to go and show you that you're wrong by building some alternative to that. And I applaud Elon for being a man of action and taking things into his own hands. But now that this decision has been made, it's going to get more interesting because what's going to happen with OpenAI next? I don't think we know, but I'm very glad to see it announced that this is behind us and we're moving on. Their decision to abandon those plans, I believe, is the right thing to do. And you know what? Now that it's been scrapped, because there has been some real legal ramifications headed to OpenAI's doorstep as a result of this, I really do think it's been a distraction. I'm glad to see it move on. But this is the part of the hearing, the part of the discovery session around the battle for AI supremacy. Sam responds and shares his position on what happened this week with OpenAI's for-profit endeavors. Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. I don't know the truth. It's really hard to tell. I just know that there doesn't seem to be very clear agreement that they had planned to do things that way all along. So I'm a little less apt to just simply agree or follow what Sam says. But let's talk about what we can learn from the hearing beyond just playing the clips for you. I hope it's been useful and you've taken something away from the conversation. But I want to impart just a tidbit as a follow on, because I think it's important for us to understand the context that this conversation is held in. We are chasing the dream. Okay. Why? Because AI is foundational to the future. I really do believe that. That's why I've started the channel, and we have many years of work ahead, regardless of who is considered to have won the race for AI. Look, I've said it once and I'll continue saying it. The capabilities that we have today with these AI models is so incredible that we will be working for the next decade just to use it for what we already have in our hands. If the development and progression of these models stops, we still have a lot of value to extract. We still have a lot of opportunities. We have scientific discoveries to make. We have real problems that are going to be solved with the help of these AI capabilities. And I just don't think that that could be understated here. It is really foundational to the future. But part of the conversation from the hearing is that it's not enough to innovate it. You also have to drive adoption. And I think that this is one of those things that I want to add my little special sauce to the conversation here and share the quote that I think has been really helpful in magnifying the need across organizations for people. And that is this: you can have the best people in your organization. You can have the best technology in your organization, but if you don't solve the right problem, you've done nothing. And innovation is those first two things. It is creating a capability that can solve real problems, but you have to match that by finding ways to actually use it and put people to work in a way that lets them benefit from it by putting it to use. But just using an innovative capability is still not enough. We have to do the right things with it. And the thing that I want to impress upon everyone here is that this is a battle that we're all in. It is a good versus evil conversation if we are not using these technologies to make things better for the people that are around us. Then someone else is going to use it to do things that don't make us better. And we have a responsibility to find ways to put it to work for the right means to solve the right problems, to make things better for us. But we can't do that unless we have the infrastructure. We have to be able to build data centers and put that hardware to good use. And in order to power the hardware, we've got to have energy. It is the fundamental building block that we need to do great things. In fact, at one moment in the conversation, I believe it was cited that by Sam, that every time we have improved the production of energy, it elevates the people that use that. They have a better standard of living. They have a better outcome for where they are and what's possible for them in their lifetime. And that is really all I need to hear to know that we should be building every kind of energy potential possible, because there is a future ahead where AI can help us to solve bigger and bigger problems. And the regulations that we put in place matter. That is both the regulations for AI, but also, as multiple different members that were testifying indicated, it is the policies and regulations that are in place for existing things, how we are able to deploy energy, what it takes to put in place the permitting to build a new location and to distribute the energy to where it needs to be. And we will continue to play this game of, is it a guardrail or is it a speed bump? Because sometimes in order to protect people, you simply have to slow things down. We are in a geopolitical situation right now where the parent complaint is things are changing too quickly. I cannot predict where things are going to happen, and it's affecting my ability to make decisions. And in that case, I think people are asking for speed bumps, not guardrails. But there is a time and a place for both of them, and it's also dynamic. What works today as a guardrail is likely to turn into a speed bump later, because we also love to add to what we've already done. It is human nature. We love to swing the pendulum, and that's why this conversation is not over. We just have a lot more work to do, both in terms of where we are from a federal government perspective in winning the AI war and inside of our companies, because I talk to companies every day where there is someone that is saying, we shouldn't use this technology. It's too dangerous. There's too much risk. And there are ways that we can mitigate risk and still get the benefit of the technology. And we'll continue to talk about that here on the channel. But as I leave the conversation today, here's what I want you to take away. Aside from the insights that we got from these leaders that are running some of the most important organizations the world over as it pertains to modern technology, the people that you saw sitting at that table have active roles in making the latest and greatest technology available to you and I to use. And I want you to think about what you can build, what you can do, how you can help those people around you by finding new and innovative ways to use the technology that's available to you. So, yeah, think back to when you were a kid. What was that thing you wanted to do that maybe you never took on? You know, what's really amazing about the AI capabilities that we have today is that it is allowing people to do things that they've only ever dreamed of, because they simply didn't have the resources or the time. And it's solving multiple different challenges. So as you leave and go back to those things that you normally do, take this with you. What is something that is in my imagination that I might now be able to make reality through the power of simply investing my time and energy in conjunction with what AI makes possible today that wasn't possible 6, 8, 24 months ago. That is how rapidly this technology is changing. If you had a conversation with ChatGPT in the beginning of 2024 and you said, it doesn't work, this is a waste of time, it's probably a good time to revisit that because it just might surprise you. Now, depending on what it is, you may discover that it hasn't improved at all, but I would venture a guess that many dimensions of what you've experimented with even a year ago have already changed. So don't let go of your dreams. Don't let go of your imagination. Put that to work. Go make some AI mistakes and see what's possible. With that, we'll see you next time. Have a great week. Appreciate you subscribing to the channel. I love hearing from you. Don't hesitate to drop a comment. And I'm still working on putting out that newsletter on a regular basis. We're going to get it out soon. Later this month, we'll have another edition of the AI Mistakes newsletter. And I look forward to sharing that with you and putting some insights in there so that you can provide yourself a foundation for experimenting and learning about AI so we can build a better world and make your imagination a reality. See you next time. Take care.